Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we are playing Bakunin versus White Company and the scenario is supplies. Now this battle report request comes courtesy of channel supporter XNED who made a request for a Bakunin battle report using a pure Stigmata duo, and that's what this list aims to work with. Obviously, this is my first Bakunin game in N5. This would also be my opponent Aaron's first White Company game in N5, so reasonably matched there, but each of us would definitely have some optimization to do with our list construction. I'm sure that anyone who has spent significant time with Bakunin since the new edition dropped would absolutely find things to improve and optimize with this list, but the first goal was, one, get a Stigmaton duo into it, which just immediately accounts for more than a third of the available points and half of the available SWC, and then two, build something resembling a sensible list around that. So we have the pure Stigmaton duo. Putting these in duos is an interesting option. You do get the option to do, they're one of the few tags that can be pure duoed, which gives them the +1 special die on ballistic skill attacks in active and reactive. And Stigmatons are a tag that benefits from that if you can find the points cost to get a whole second one into a list. Stigmatons, since their introduction in N4, have been one of probably the most interesting pieces in the game because they are a multi-role piece. And multi-role pieces in almost every wargame, if they are actually okay for their points cost, tend to be very, very interesting. But having multi-role pieces that are actually good for their points cost in almost any wargame tends to be rare, because game developers will be aware of the fact that if you have a model that can shoot and do melee, or whatever, right, any two different roles that it can fulfill, you kind of have to price both of those capabilities in, or the multi-role model will just be better than any of the single-role models it's competing with. And so it's quite rare to see multi-role models that are actually really quite good, or even just balanced, because the balance tension of that kind of a concept is just difficult to overcome. And in Stigmatons, they've more or less done that, basically since release, and certainly through N4 and in N5, where a Stigmaton is a very solidly built light tag. It is held back not by its silhouette, or its speed, or its armor, or its BTS, or its wounds. It's also a remote presence tag in a faction that otherwise doesn't have those. All of these are good things. The only thing that holds the Stig back from being a tag in the traditional things you expect a tag from is that its gunfighting output is okay. A heavy flamethrower +1 burst is nice. A heavy rocket launcher +1 burst is barely credible as far as weapons go, although there is only so much you can expect from an Armor 6 BTS 6 3 wound piece for 56 points. However, on top of being a serviceable gunfighter, and fast, and resilient, and having good close-in attack, Stigmatons are hackers. They are just full, regular hackers with an upgraded Carbonite program and ECM hacker, all for that price tag. And what that means you get is a serviceable gun, and one of the most durable hackers in the entire game because it has 3 wounds, BTS 6, and ECM. And effectively, the hacking component doesn't attract any SWC cost, which means you can fit a Stigmaton into a list as a hacker, and you will pay the SWC associated with it being a tag with a tag-style weapon, but you kind of get the hacking 0.5 SWC for free. And so what this list is aiming to do by duoing the two Stigs, firstly, it's to elevate their actual ranged ability, their ability both in the active turn and reactive turn to fire off those rockets. It's to elevate it to a point that is more than just acceptable, but actually kind of a credible weapon. We'll see how well that works out. It is then also trying to make use of the fact that because I'm kind of getting that hacking capability for free, I want to build a full and complete list around the Stigmatons that does hacking things and asymmetric stuff and establishes a repeater network and has like at least one other gun and some missile play, etc. Now, having played through this list once, I think maybe the only thing I might change is to cut the Vertigo Zond. The Vertigo Zond being 1.5 SWC on top of the two Stigmatons. The challenge with the Stigmatons in a duo, if you're intending to duo them consistently, is they have to be in the same spot. And as we work through this list, you'll see that I fit another gun into the list, but by having the Stigmatons and a Vertigo Zone, I have guaranteed that I can only put one other gun in the list. And right beneath the Stigmatons, we can see a Reverend Custodia Killer Hacker and 2 Cenobites. It would be really nice for one of those Cenobites to be a heavy rocket launcher Cenobite, or even a Moira HMG, rather than just a pair of close assault Cenobites. As much as they would be totally serviceable this game, they're very attractively costed, they fight very well up close. One of the things that's really nice to have in a list is not to have all of your guns in one or even two spots. Being able to spread your forces out across the table, particularly your longer range weapons, lets you maximize the number of angles and lines of fire you can take advantage of. And by doing the stigmatons, which is obviously not compulsory, it was the brief in this case, but you could absolutely just split the two stigmatons up. There probably would be times where you would have to, just because they can't cover enough ground when they're in a duo. So that's just something to consider. Anyway, we then have Stigmaton Duo. We have a Haris team of 2 Cenobites and a Reverend Custodia KHD. The Reverend is very important to this list because you need killer hacking in this list. We have Stigmatons, we're going to be doing hacking, we've taken network projection to take care of that. The Reverend Custodia is part of that network projection, and she is our only KHD payoff if I want to go and do assassinations on enemy hackers on the first or second turn or whatever. Frankly, another KHD would be nice, but the Reverend Custodia is probably the best one in Bakunin. And with 112 points spent on tags, she's it. She has to be it. One of these Cenobites would be really nice to be as a HRL, but this is still a great move forward, do objectives, and fight up close Haris team, because Cenobites are just freaking outstanding for 20 points. We then have a Vertigo Zond, as mentioned, really could cut this if I don't think I need the Guided. I didn't use Guided once this game. Guided is absolutely a sometimes food. I'm not convinced this list needs it. It's got plenty of close assault, ability to dig in. You can do other kinds of offensive hacking. That might be something I would consider cutting in future iterations. We then have a Salute Evo hacker. Baggage, on the other hand, is very good. The Salute would do actually almost nothing this game, but having the option for support wear, either to give support wear Fairy Dust to the Stigs, or you'll see a Cyclone in Group 2 to give it marksmanship to turn it into a real gun. Both of those is useful, but the more important thing is baggage. 2 Transductor Zones, rounds Combat Group 1 out, 9 regular orders, 2 Tactical Awareness, and the Combat Group 2 we have basically a support combat group that can transition into a little bit of gunfighting and a little bit of close assault. The close assault comes from 2 Morlocks. They are Assault Pistol Morlocks. Love me Assault Pistol Morlocks, one of my favorite warband profiles in the game. Many was the time in N4 where I would impetuous a Morlock forward and actually just assault pistol something to death because burst 4 is good, but they're also here, they will fight in melee if they need to, even with just that AP CCW, but they're really trying to make more use of the assault pistol, and they are a source of smoke, and smoke is very useful. We then have a 4-person team, although you can split one of the moderators away if you want to keep them safe. Moderator, Lieutenant, Moderator, Clockmaker, who counts as a moderator with an armed turret combi rifle, and a Cyclone, Feuerback, and Pitcher. Now, the Cyclone is at 28 points, maybe very marginally expensive, but it does a couple of things that are useful. First, it is one of the best pieces of network projection in the game because it has an X-Visor with its Pitcher, which means it just fires a million miles. Pitcher range bands in N5 are way too freaking permissive, and they get even more permissive with an X-Visor, which means if you can see it, you can shoot on 12s, 2 dice, 1 dice and a special die, shoot the Pitcher out. The other thing it does is it is a 1 SWC gun. We've spent the remaining half an SWC on the Salute. The 1 SWC gun means we get to 6 SWC. Now, the Cyclone Feuerback, as far as guns go, by itself, not fantastic. It's just a Blizzard Steel 12 Feuerback. But once we add the +1 special die from the Link team and the possibility of marksmanship from the Salute, it is a totally fine gunfighting piece, particularly with a Clockmaker right behind it to pick it back up if it ever goes down. So in this list, we've got 3 fire teams, lots of specialists, plenty of mobility around the field, some smoke, good gunfighting, very good network projection, kind of just good enough hacking. But this is a list that is very difficult to lose the hacking game with, because traditionally you might lose the hacking game by having all of your hackers killed. It's really, really hard to put those 2 Stigmatons down. Like any KHD in the game, up to and including something like an Anathematic, if you have the firewalls up on those Stigmatons, they're just going to keep going and going and going. And that makes throwing out pitches with this list highly valuable. You can do a little bit of turret play. Basically just as well-rounded as I can make a duo Stigmaton list. Now, it would be playing against my friend Aaron's first foray out of Nomads and into White Company. Aaron's going to be taking a little bit of approach he's talked about with me in N5 of kind of doing the same thing that I did. He's building a collection of Infinity that he can potentially use to play many different factions, so that when a tournament mission pack drops, he can go, I think I'd like to play faction X in that, rather than going, I think I have to figure out how to make Tunguska work in that. I think that's a really nice way to enjoy Infinity, particularly once you have some understanding of the game, and his first foray out of his existing factions is into Whiteco. Now, that means this is his first attempt at Whiteco. I actually think this is a really good and cohesive list, but after the game we had one real specific change that is worth making, and there's probably at least one White Company player looking at this right now and screaming about it, because I know who that player is and I know what their thoughts will be, and I agree with them. Yes, this list should have Lankai. Anyway, this list as stands is a 5-person fire team, Hawkwood K1 Sniper, Fusilier, Paramedic, Emily Chain of Command. Hawkwood counts as a Fusilier, which gets you 4 Fusiliers into that fire team, which means both Hawkwood and Emily have +1 ballistic skill in addition to the +1 special die, etc. Now, Emily is a little bit of a meme piece for her points cost. Specfire is even less reliable than Guided, but in this particular case, she's mostly being taken for the out that you can get from Guided, but because of Chain of Command. She's taken as Chain of Command because the list is running a Guija Lieutenant. There are some tag options in Whiteco, but if you want a proper main battle tag, the Guija is the way to get it, and at 77 points, he's eminently serviceable. We then have 2 Peacemaker Mind Layers. These are fantastic profiles. Taking 2 is kind of the right thing to do and kind of not, depending on table mission mix, etc. I am a massive Peacemaker lover. I have loved Peacemakers since N3, but it has always kind of been the case, particularly in N4. In N4, they got jacked up in their points cost and just stopped being worthwhile. In N5, they have not had their points cost really changed, but they've been improved to be worth the cost. But they're still 24 points and half in SWC for the really cool Mindlayer Oxbot profile. Now, that's all well and good, but we're beginning to spend almost 50 points of the list on 2 of them, and they are really a diminishing return unit, because the large silhouette 4 base of the Peacemaker, you're just sometimes going to struggle to find a good spot to put the second one. If I can fit 2 Peacemakers in a list, 100% will. I really, really like them. But in terms of things that you might consider cutting, often it's going to be the second Peacemaker that is one of the first things that you should cut. And so just talking now about changes that we might consider making to this list, if you were an aspiring White Company player, cut this Peacemaker, exchange it for Lankai, and use the points that you free up to turn the Paramedic Fusilier into a Fusilier hacker. A second hacker in this list is highly valuable rather than relying on just one, although she's quite a good hacker, and Lankai is just one of the best pieces in the game. In addition, he complements this list really nicely because he is an unhackable piece that can comfortably move forward, and we will see how relevant that is over the course of the game. Anyway, we've then got a Fugazi, a Mulebot, a Varangian by itself, a Mech Engineer with a Combi turret, again, just by itself. Its job is to unstick the Guija if something goes tragically wrong. Otherwise, 17 points for a specialist who throws out turrets. Lashmi is the hacker. She's a very nice hacker for her points cost. She's a little expensive, but she's a hacker. Hacking Device Plus from memory, and she can put up Fairy Dust. Fairy Dust is, when you have a Guija as your lieutenant, it's just a nice thing to have. She's also a Mind Layer with Cyber Mines, just a good capability. You could, if you wanted to, chuck her into the first combat group and have her like join this Link team, for example, but she's also totally serviceable by herself. The main thing is her picture becomes much more reliable when she's linked. When she's not linked, she can Cyber Mask. I would generally be inclined to put her in like a duo or a Haris team, anywhere that she can get fire team bonuses, which probably means being part of a Haris team most of the time in Whiteco. In QK, for example, she can be with a Havser and that takes care of it. But yeah, nice piece. We then have a Fugazi Drone Bot and a Warcore. Warcore's totally fine this edition. They can, particularly this ITS season, they're specialists for 3 points and they still do Warcore things. So, with the exception that this list should have Lankai in it, like it just should have Lankai, it's an unhackable stealth assault piece. This is otherwise a really nicely built White Company list. It manages to fit the Guija and otherwise hit many of the interesting notes that you get from hybridizing Yuqing and Panoceania, and I really like it as a result. So, jumping into the game, I have won the lieutenant role to go first. Aaron's got a whip 13 lieutenant. I've got a whip 13 lieutenant. I win the role. I pick to go first for a couple of reasons, but the main reason is that a significant portion of my game plan revolves placing material down. I don't have mine layer turrets. I don't really have any mine layer at all. I want to be able to get my pitches and my turrets out. I want to be able to get at least one objective and pull back behind that wall of material and play that kind of a game plan, which means I need to go first. In supplies, that's like very marginally a risk, because it gives your opponent the final right of reply, but it was the right call in this case. Aaron has picked the left side of the table where he will be deploying. He's going to be actually using my models for this, and I'll be using his since I'm playing Bakunin, which is Nomads, which is what he owns. And so I go about setting up. Now, one of the things about this list is that I could have reserved back one or both of the Stigs, and now that I have played the list out, I was actually pretty comfortable for command tokens. Knowing that I was comfortable for command tokens, I would actually probably reserve drop the Stigmatons in this particular case, but I expected with two Moloch Grouper and wanting to probably call down a speedball, I expected to need all of my command tokens. So I just deployed the Stigmatons normally, and I just reserve dropped a Morlock on just in case there ended up being either a position that I really needed smoke or an attack run that Aaron left undefended. Neither of those was the case. Probably should have reserve dropped the two Stigs. Anyway, from top to bottom, on the sort of the top side of my deployment zone, which would be my right side of the deployment zone, we have one of the Morlocks and then the Custodia Reverend Harrys. They are prepared to move up into this building, try and seize. There is just inside this building, there is one of the supplies objectives, looking to grab that and then maybe retreat and do some close assault fighting around the confines of this building, which is see into or out of, but not through. We've then got the reserve drop Morlock here, which really was just a bit irrelevant, but potentially could have done something interesting. We've got the 4-person fire team hanging out here, and the Evo hacker hiding underneath the stairs with them. And so what this gives us is it's our baggage zone of control. We've got the Cyclone able to reload, the Engineer able to reload, do all of the stuff that this fire team wants to do as a support function. Nice, well and good. And then we have the Stig duo deployed here and here. They're hanging just a little bit back, and that's mostly because I did a deployment zone check during my deployment just to see what lines of fire there were. I'd originally wanted the second Stigmaton to deploy in this nook here, but there was clear line of fire from this tower in Aaron's deployment zone. I wanted no part of that. Otherwise, there's just some Fugazis scattered around. It's the 3 fire teams that are going to be doing the bulk of the work in this particular case. My HVT is hanging up here along this table edge. For Aaron's part, he reserve drops his Guija, of course. Now, I did kind of know that there was a Guija coming. This was something that we talked through before the game. One of the things about White Company is that they have pretty clearly bracketed lieutenant willpowers. You have willpower 12 usually means a Fusilier. Willpower 14 means any of the characters or Hawkwood, etc. Willpower 12 is the most common. Willpower 13 technically could mean a Jujak lieutenant, but you would probably never take that for any reason, which means willpower 13 kind of telegraphs a Guija. Now, if I could get my hacking network down, not hugely scared of the Guija. If I could not get my hacking network down, quite scared of the Guija. That contributed, among other things, to the decision to go first. So on this building with the tower, yep, down goes Hawkwood. Hawkwood is hanging out with the wildest field of fire here. There are plenty of pieces of terrain in the midfield that obstruct fields of fire, but Hawkwood can still quite easily see through this doorway here into the building to ground level down here, but there are some high ground signs hanging out that will prevent him from seeing all the way across the field. But then he has a very long line sort of down there that, yes, is going to be obstructing these Stigs if they decide to move up and around to this objective on my left side of the table. Good position for a fire team. Emily is positioned slightly further forward, just in case she needs to do some spec fire, and then there's just Fusiliers on picket duty. The first Peacemaker is deployed up behind this high ground over here, along with its mine, just up onto the high ground, ready to detonate into the room. The second Peacemaker, and this is where we see how you can have this situation with Peacemakers, where there just wasn't a great location for it at ground level, so in order to preserve its function as a repeater, Aaron has pushed it up onto this high ground here, which it's really not ever going to leave. However, its helper bot, its Oxbot is at ground level, as is the mine it's deployed, along with Aaron's HVT over here. There's some Fugazis otherwise scattered around and about. The Engineer is hanging out down at ground level here. The Varangian is hanging out down behind these buildings. Now, Lashmi in this picture is here. She's actually up against the back table edge. The reason why we've moved her forward is because that's my model and I'm terrified of her falling onto the floor. But the reason why she's up against the back table edge is that Aaron is protecting her from the possibility of being assassinated by pitchers and KHDs on the first turn. If I could kill her, if I could get a pitcher onto her and then hack her with Trinity, that's it. All of Aaron's repeaters do nothing anymore because he doesn't have any other hackers. She needs to live to be a threat. And by putting her basically all the way back here, there is nowhere I can put a pitcher on ground level in any of this space that will actually reach 8 inches back to her. And so that means that to get a picture that could actually affect her, I would have to get really high up somehow to actually be able to see down onto these buildings, and even that would potentially be a challenge. And so this is one of the ways that you can use distance to protect assets from pitcher strikes, which is a skill that you really need in N5 because pitcher range bands are disgustingly permissive. Now, all of that done, Aaron's Ouija reserve drops down here. It's got a nice long line up this alleyway, basically kind of around to there, maybe seeing through here a little bit, and importantly, it is in a position where if it takes fire, it can guts back behind the building and be nice and safe. The ideal position might have been to put it by this building here, except that then it would have been at risk because there's this little low ground wall you can see there, highlighted in red, that would have prevented it from gutsing back if it took damage, and that would just be a possible disaster if I moved up and was able to get a beat on it with some kind of a gun that put it down. So it's just in a position where it can guts. Always put your tags in positions where they can make guts moves to safety. Now, as noted, I am going first, and at this point, I'm going to tell the story of two possible timelines. The first of the two timelines is one in which I just throw the game the fuck away, which is something that can happen to anyone, and it's very interesting to kind of consider the mentality. Hawkwood can see, like, a lot of things. He's got visibility onto basically all three of the objectives. Fantastic. That's why Aaron picked that table side. Hawkwood is a great aero piece. Hawkwood is a great aero piece, just to emphasize, because he natively has +1 special die, packing a K1 weapon, which can theoretically hurt anyone, and is in a link which gives him a further +1 special die, +1 ballistic skill, and he has mimetism. I have no gun in my entire army that has a favorable face-to-face roll against that. Not one. The Stigs do not have a favorable face roll. Marksmanship on the Cyclone does not give it a favorable face-to-face roll. There is no model in my army that can, on the balanced probabilities, outshoot Hawkwood. But the Stigmatons do have +1 special die, which puts them at burst 4 effective. And with a high damage heavy rocket launcher, if they connect, if they actually win the face-to-face roll, burst 4 against burst 3, they have a good chance of either putting Hawkwood all the way to dead with continuous damage, high damage weapon, no cover, or at least wounding him and making him drop down at that point, just in order to avoid losing the piece, because Aaron is aware of the value that piece has. And so, what I choose to do in the first of two timelines is tactical awareness orders on the Stigs and orders on the Stigs. The first Stig can just move straight forward and take a face-to-face roll, and move the other one up with, so I spend tactical awareness orders and regulars, and that means I have basically 2 Stigs, 6 wounds worth of gunfighting to fight Hawkwood, knowing that he can really only reliably maybe do 1 wound per engagement back to me, so I have a lot of chances to do this. So I take the face-to-face roll, lose and take a wound, take the face-to-face roll, take the face-to-face roll, lose and take a wound, take the face-to-face roll, lose and take a wound, this is on a different Stig, take a face-to-face roll, lose and take a wound, take a face-to-face roll, lose and take a wound, take a face-to-face roll, lose and take a wound, and then stop and realize that I probably needed to reconsider my turn like 3 orders ago. Now, while that sounds kind of unlucky, I think I actually took 4 wounds over 7 orders. I may have said 1 too many there. Took 2 wounds on each Stig over the course of 7 orders of gunfighting. Let's break down the probabilities, and then let's consider like what I should actually be doing and how we wound back a little bit and I actually played the turn. The first thing to consider is what are the odds here? You can just go to a dice calculator and you can find that. There is a very, very good N5 dice calculator. If you Google Infinity N5 dice calculator, you will find it. It's mobile friendly. It's very easy to just set the odds up and run a calculation. And the results of that calculation are that in any given face-to-face roll, Hawkwood's got about a 1 in 3 chance of wounding the Stigs, and the Stigs have got about a 1 in 4 chance of wounding Hawkwood and a 1 in about 6 chance of burning him to the ground. And so the fights that I'm choosing to take here, I mean, they're kind of just bad odds on the face of it, but there are times you could choose to do it. A 1 in 3 chance to take a wound versus a 1 in 4 chance to do a wound, when you have a lot of wounds and plentiful orders, is not necessarily the wrong approach to the situation. And it's very possible that there would be a timeline in which this battle report goes, yep, and I tried to brute force Hawkwood down, and it took 3 orders, but I got him to dead, and then I went through and played the turn. And that would have been a valid way to approach the turn. But what actually materialized was the catastrophic failure state, which was not that a stigmata died, although I took 4 wounds across them, each of them was badly wounded by the end of this particular way of approaching the turn, but I just didn't progress the game state at all. I spent all of this time trying to shoot Hawkwood, and what effectively happened, in addition to me taking some wounds, was none of my actual objectives were progressed. In my head, I went, okay, the odds on this, I sort of eyeballed the odds, and I went, like, he's gonna win more face-to-face rolls than he doesn't, but I've probably only got to win once, maybe twice. That's good enough to roll the dice on, let's have a crack. And then the failure state materialized, and then the failure state materialized, and then the failure state materialized 7 times. The problem with that is that by the time about the 5th failure state materialized, I officially passed into the catastrophic failure state. Because at that point, not only had I taken a whole bunch of wounds on all of my models, but nothing else was going to happen that turn. I was not going to be able to do any of the other things that I needed to. And even though putting down Hawkwood would have given me pretty significant rain across the board, I didn't need to put him down to do the other things I wanted to do with my turn. And Aaron at this point basically said, do you want to just walk some of those back? And I'm like, actually, yes, because it will make for a more interesting game. Like, I kind of just lost the game at this point being an idiot. But what did I actually need to do? Like, not just, let's walk this back and I don't fight Hawkwood because I'm now terrified of him. How should I have played this turn out, accounting for the possibility of good luck and bad luck? And so here is now we will leap into the second of these 2 possible timelines, into the better way to play this turn. So, what are my goals for this turn? Goal 1, get at least 1 supply box and pull back. Goal 2, establish a defensive network that is going to be challenging for Aaron to push through. And goal 3, if possible, kill Hawkwood. Those are the actual priorities. So let's pursue those fights and those objectives in that order of priority. That means, in our alternate timeline, Super Jump Morlock, that's what he's rolled chemistry, moves forward with his irregular, jumps up, and lays a smoke grenade down here, allowing me to move up into this building. The Cenobite and Reverend team move up and forward. Along the way, she fires a pitcher down. It's going to land on this elevated high ground behind this orange Brutal Cities barricade there, and then move forward, pick up a supply box, and evacuate. By the end of the turn, they won't have pulled back to complete safety, but the Cenobites will be on defensive duties, kind of like, around the stairs, and the Reverend herself will be prone behind the stairs. Cool, okay. That is part of my second priority and my first priority accomplished. That gives us orders in the first combat group to now attempt to engage Hawkwood, and it gives us all of our orders in combat group 2 to do our combat group 2 stuff. We will now move forward and attempt to have the Stigs engage Hawkwood, knowing that, okay, how many orders did it take for the Moira and team to move around? Of the 7 that I had available, plus the 2 tactical awareness on the first turn, they've consumed 5 of those. That's like a move, move pit, move pitcher, move pickup box, move, getting them back to where they are. That leaves me with 2 regular orders and 2 tactical awareness orders, 4 orders to go after Hawkwood. We keep all of the rolls against Hawkwood as they are. I don't get 4 free orders of shooting him. I take 4 face-to-face rolls against him. I fail all of them. He wins all of those because he has ballistic skill 14, 3 dice, mimetism, and I take a pair of wounds across my stigmata, which pull back at the end of those orders. That is not a good face-to-face, like not a good outcome of the gunfight against Hawkwood, but by only committing the number of orders that I could safely commit against him and not throwing good many after bad, I was able to accomplish my other objectives with the first combat group and not have a bad outcome death spiral into a catastrophic outcome in which I throw my entire turn away, nearly killing all of my tags. The second combat group, in the first timeline, would have to have spent all of their orders trying perhaps to repair the stigmatas, just so that the Guija, who would be completely able to advance up the field at that point, doesn't get to just pick them both up for free. In this timeline, I am comfortable leaving them each with just one wound taken each. So we're going to use the orders in the second combat group, in addition to the Morlock stuff, like the Morlocks are in group 2, they threw smoke. We're just going to build our defenses. And so the Cyclone gets to work and it fires a bunch of pitches out. It places one down here, which you can actually see in this photo because we wound things back and I forgot to remove that piece. But we got one repeated down here. We get another one down like at ground level somewhere around here or something like that. And we throw up a turret, reload, and throw up a turret with the Clockmaker, which gets us, those turrets are going to be put in relatively safe positions. In fact, we'll jump forward. You can see in this photo at the beginning of, it actually appears to be an end of turn 2 photo, which is a weird time to take that one. I think this is the only other photo they have, but you can see where the turrets have gone down in this particular case. They're just deployed in these positions here. So if we jump back, both turrets are in position where they are protecting each of the 2 remaining supply boxes that Aaron might be able to grab without being exposed to just immediate destruction from the Guija or anything like that. So that turns this from a catastrophic turn that probably is just game losing to a turn that is, it's not the best. I've done no damage to any of Aaron's stuff and I've taken wounds on both tags. That is a non-ideal state, but it's still a state in which the game has progressed favorably toward my way of wanting to resolve things. And especially because of the absence of unhackable assault pieces apart from like a Varangian in Aaron's list, that's actually a really solid progressive defense that will help me move the game forward. So Aaron moves over to his turn now in this second timeline, and he has a few things that he needs to do. He wants to grab a supply box himself, he wants to kill anything that he can, but I'm kind of hiding from him. The Cyclone has gone back prone, for example, and he wants to clear off that repeater. So the Varangian guard down behind this building just moves out and around. It will get spotlight in the process of doing this, but it moves and it chain colts. I think it takes 2 orders, but it will put down this repeater and then pull back a little bit just so it's not a danger to anyone in terms of missile splash. Get some smoke down over this objective, and that will free up the Guija actually to move and take that. So the Guija is going to move up and around, looking for things to fight, but not really finding anything. It's going to deploy its little helper friend, and then start moving out and around this way while the helper friend goes to grab the objective. Now at this point, kind of pause because, yep, okay, the helper friend grabs the objective in about 1 order. It's going to start pulling back and the Guija is going to begin looking for a place to do something that's useful. But before that, the Peacemaker is going to just see if it can capitalize on something. So this Peacemaker jumps up to here and its helper bot, its Oxbot moves up as well. I dodge the Morlock around to see it. And at that point, the Guija is like, okay, this is a problem that I can solve. So the Guija begins moving this direction, takes 2 orders, in which time the friend bot begins its path back to the back of the deployment zone. And the Guija takes, I think it's 2 orders of the Guija shooting as well, but eventually puts the Morlock down. The Guija then finishes its run moving back to safety along the side of the table here, and its little helper bot comes all the way back around to hang out behind these buildings here. Now, I'm a dum-dum and forgot to take photos on turn 2. That photo is the beginning of my turn 3. But on turn 2, we are going to continue to play this the Nomad way. Aaron has killed 2 of the repeaters that I've placed. He's killed this one on ground level here, and he's killed the one that I shot into the room. He just put that down with Hawkwood, took a couple of orders. But we have reloaded some of our pitches on the Cyclone. We can continue to do that, and move around and forward. More Morlock smoke goes down, and there are a couple of big plays that we make this turn, all of which are a little bit non-lethal, but which do progress the game state. So the first thing is that the Cyclone just reestablishes the picture in this room. Aaron can kill it again, but it took me 1 order to put it down. It'll take him 1 order to kill it. We then begin to move the Stigs around this way, just hacking as we go, right? If the Stig is nothing but a 56-point, very resilient tactical awareness hacker, that's still not too bad. And after a couple of attempts, we Oblivion down the Peacemaker that's gotten up over here, which we will then, because the repeater is turned off, the Oxport is turned off, the Cenobite has a crack. We are actually hoping to just kill the Peacemaker, but it saves 4 saves against chain rifles. Trying to shotgun me, I don't take any damage either. And I have learned my lesson about throwing good money after bad. While the first of the 2 Cenobites is taking that face-to-face roll, the rest of the team is moving. And after 2 orders, the Moira has moved as far as she can be, not the Moira, sorry, the Custodia has moved as far as she can be and still be in the link team. It is time to just be done with that face-to-face roll. I am leaving the Peacemaker where it is, and we are moving out and around, because the goal with this link for this team is to hand off one of the 2 supply boxes to a Cenobite, move around and grab this one, and then pull back. While we do that, we're going to hand the second supply box off the Cenobite as well. So the Custodia is basically like, here, I've grabbed this, you take it. Right, I've grabbed the other one, you take it. We are handing those off to the Cenobites for a very specific reason. They're going to be pulling back, and by the end of this turn, with quite a few orders having spent, they're going to end up with both Cenobites hanging back on either side of the wall, sort of in this part of the table here. The Custodia herself will be a little bit further forward. It has to be the Cenobites carrying the boxes, because I've chosen to go first. That has certain advantages in supplies, but the second player always has the last attempt to go after boxes in the final round in supplies, and can just attempt to get kills to make you drop them. And Aaron has a Ballistic Skill 14 X-Visor Grenade Launcher and EM Grenade Launcher in a link team in his deployment zone with very, very long range bans. If I have just the Custodia or any single wound troop carrying these boxes, Aaron has a viable line of play in the final turn, which is spec fire, spec fire, spec fire, spec fire, spec fire until something is dead. Now, he can EM grenade the Cenobites all he likes. They will still be holding the boxes in an isolated death grip, but if he's going to fire regular grenades and score kills, the Cenobites are much, much more durable against that. It's not really practical to kill Cenobites with spec fire in the same way that it would be to kill, say, the Custodia with spec fire. And so, after many, many orders, we get the Custodia to grab this box and get everyone hanging out basically back here, where they are as safe as can be. And in order to ensure that they are safe, it's time for more and more pitches and turrets. Now, the pitches are starting to go out. We'll establish a few more. Quite a lot will be positioned over the course of the table as we do all of this movement. We place just one more turret, not in a position that's particularly meaningful. We basically just place the turret down here, which is the Hawkwood, please spend an order killing this. I want you to have less time on your turn. It's 1 order for 1 order. That's literally it. The Stigmatons, meanwhile, are going to move up and around here, just with their tactical awareness orders. We've already spent the first of those to isolate the Peacemaker up here. We're going to use the other to spotlight. It takes 1 order, actually, which is quite lucky. We're going to spotlight the HVT in order to accomplish HVT designation, and then basically just kind of pull back to this position here and here. So this is another turn in which I've done basically nothing offensively, but I do have 2 boxes, and quite a lot of my stuff is still alive as well, which means that we're in the game, boys. Now, just to jump forward to the picture at the beginning of my turn 3, Aaron's turn 2 is not it is not able to accomplish a great deal, and that's really because it's this turn in particular that we see really just the cost and price of trying to build a list that has all of its assault elements hackable. Lankai on this turn or the previous turn would have potentially broken the game open in a really significant way. Put Lankai or Shona Karano or Lash or Valkyrie just in your white company lists. You've got your selection of incredible close. Put Deadpool in your white company lists. You have a selection of some of the best character close assault pieces in the game. You should include them. What happens instead is just a fair bit of like poke play. The Guija moves up and around to try and get a little bit of damage done. Doesn't really accomplish particularly much. A pitcher goes down from Lashmi, which he uses to spotlight in order to accomplish telemetry on a Stigmaton. Doesn't actually do any more damage to it. Just this kind of poke and prod and back and forth. More clearing of repeaters, but not able to fully get up around and past all of them. And so it's sort of like a not hugely committal turn from Aaron. There's a little bit of spec fire actually, and that sucks down some orders, but it does. I think it takes it's not a lucky volley, but I think it takes like 5 shots hitting on 8s to eventually land a grenade on this rooftop, which does not kill the Cyclone, but it does kill the Clockmaker, which puts an end to the source of turrets, puts an end to any repair options. I've already called down Speedball at this point. Both Stigs are actually carrying switch-ons, which is part of why Lashmi didn't bother doing much more to them. But it is overall a turn in which it is a struggle to push past the emplaced material defenses that I have positioned. The turrets themselves are not doing a tremendous amount of work, not really at this point. They were positioned to protect objectives and smoke, let Aaron get past them, so the turrets really are not going to hugely contribute to the rest of the game, but the pitches are making a massive impact on play. Now, I roll into my third turn with kind of a pretty clear plan. I am holding 2 supply boxes. I need to just make that continue on through turn 3. So my goal is to frustrate Aaron's offense to the maximum extent possible. And there are a couple of things that we're going to do to accomplish that. There's really like one big play that we're going to make, though. We are going to throw out some pitches. We are going to be moving the stigmatons around a little bit and isolating things. In particular, over the course of this turn, we will isolate and therefore, for practical purposes, kill, because all I care about is that the order is not available to Aaron on his final turn. The Peacemaker and the Fugazi Dronbot hanging out down here. Now, they are not actually dead. In a different part of the game or in a different scenario, isolating them would be useless depending on what they were accomplishing. But in this case, it's just an order gone away, and that's all that I need. We are also going to get, once again, a pitcher down. I think we actually even run the Fugazi Dronbot on this rooftop. Fugazi Dronbot, it's the Transductor Zond on this rooftop. Hop it down, run up and around, and we possess the Guija. And having possessed the Guija, because we've identified basically Emily is probably not a major threat to the Cenobites. They're tough enough to weather all but the luckiest Specfire, but the Guija can get that kill. And so we pull the Guija, we actually pull him forward, and we leave the Guija in a position where it is out of cover, in contact with the Transductor Zond, so that when Aaron depossesses it, it will be in melee, inside zone of control of this pitcher, and obviously the Transductor, but it'll probably die, and in line of fire of both Stigmatas and one of the turrets, and a Morlock, and the now standing up Cyclone. So every possible gun I have is pointing at it, and it's in a repeater area. Pass turn to Aaron, his move. Now, sensibly, he dispossesses the tag, and then he just goes to activate it, which is fair enough. We sort of talk through the different lines of play that he has, and actually probably the most interesting decision he has to make is whether to have triggered Chain of Command when the tag entered a null state, because possession is a null state, I believe. I think you can trigger Chain of Command. Ultimately, won't matter, but it's just an interesting choice, because you know the tag is going to recover from the null state before your loss of Lieutenant check, because you spend a command token at the beginning of the turn. Ultimately isn't going to end out the game, but is kind of an interesting decision point. Now, the Guija at this point is still carrying a switch on, but that is no good against possession, and it is in a repeater area. It activates, it has to clear itself free of the Transductor Zond, and it does so easily because it is carrying a massive sword. During that order, I attempt to possess it with both tags, and I shoot it with every other gun. The guns do almost nothing. I think I do 1 wound to it with an explosive round. I elect to fire explosive because it's out of cover, but I think the math on that is very close either way. But I explosive round it with the Cyclone. Nothing else hits. The Transductor Zond obviously evaporates in a volley of mist fire. But Lashmi has put up Fairy Dust by this point, and thanks to Fairy Dust, I fail one of the 2 possession attempts, and the Guija spangs both of the others. Now, it has to go again, and so what it does is it moves out and around this way, and I attempt to possess it twice again, and I shoot it with everything else again, and it weathers almost all of the shots, and it puts 2 shots back downrange against the Stigs. Now, I could have shot with rockets, and that might have been better. Each of the Stigs would have been rolling basically 2 dice on 16s, 1+1 special die, rather than 1 dice on 10s for possession. But if I succeed the possession, that's it. The run is over and I'm completely done. So I chose to do that, but it might have been better, particularly since the Guija had line of fire, to just take the ballistic skill attacks. Now, regardless, there are too many shots coming into the Guija for him to oppose all of them. This time I fire double action round. I fire explosive again, but the Guija weathers almost everything. I think it takes 1 order again, but again, is not possessed. And that gets it clear of the repeaters, And at that point, it moves out and around this way and begins working its way around this building. Now, it has taken 2 wounds, and it is moving up because my models, you can actually see them, are hiding here. But first, there is one final obstacle. Because the Cyclone has a 360 visor. It's not actually prone, ignore that, it's stood up. I think that's a superfluous prone marker from previous turns. The Cyclone is standing and has a 360 visor, which means it can see down here. God bless the 360 visor, what a wonderful and useful piece of equipment. And as the Guija moves around, it has to fight the Cyclone first, and the Cyclone wins the face-to-face roll. Firing double action rounds in this particular case, because the armor piercing, particularly once the Guija is in cover, is definitely the correct choice, and it does the last required wound to the Guija. It puts it down, and that effectively ends the run. Now, Aaron has a couple of orders left. He does spend them attempting to Specfire because he could always crit. If he crits, maybe he does 2 wounds, but he does not crit, he does not do the additional wounds. And that leaves the game with me carrying 2 supply boxes, Aaron carrying 1, each of us having done 1 classified, and neither of us securing a HVT. I should probably be attempting to do that, but this distance is slightly too long. I didn't have anything that I could leave around the HVT because both of the Stigs had to move out and around to here. So I forget the scoring, but that puts us on each with 1 classified, me with 2 supply boxes, and Aaron with 1, which is enough in supplies to basically be, yep, that's a solid win, and I'll take it. Now, that is absolutely and entirely predicated on the fact that most of the way through my first turn, Aaron said, hey, you're doing a battle report for this, do you want to wind back some of what you just did? Which was extremely generous of him, because I will remind you that there was the first of 2 timelines in which I just faffed the game away, killing both of my tags trying to fight Hawkwood. Lesson learned. Hawkwood is a very good ARO piece. Now, I think it has made for a much better overall game that catastrophic failure materialized, because the kind of like uninteresting version of this story is that one of the Stigs just won the face-to-face roll first time and burned Hawkwood to the waterline. That's something that could have happened. Had a 16% chance per face-to-face roll, 16.4% per face-to-face roll to kill Hawkwood all the way to dead. But that isn't what happened. He won each of the favorable face-to-face rolls that he had consecutively, and because of my decision the first time around to pursue the game the way I did, a catastrophic failure that I caused materialized. And so that's kind of the takeaway from this, is as much as it's like, I will be in a good overall spot if I suppress this ARO piece, that will make for a good game, that will make for an advantageous position, was absolutely a true assessment. It was not a good assessment of what I actually needed to accomplish in the first turn in order to set the preconditions to win the game overall. Hawkwood dies is a Hawkwood dies question mark profit underpants gnome plan, not a plan to actually win the game. There was no follow-up, once Hawkwood is dead, I can do X, because anything, particularly with regards to the objectives across the middle of the table, anything that I might have done that would have been made easier by killing Hawkwood, I could equally have accomplished by throwing smoke, which is what I ended up doing. So, very, very useful lesson about a degree of clinical thinking with respect to how you actually win the game, which I would not have had if I had just chosen to Unga Bunga into Hawkwood and been rewarded. That made this a very interesting game. Big thanks, as always, to Aaron for making the trip down to my place to play, and doing the army swap. I got to play with his wonderfully painted miniatures, he got to play with mine, and thanks again to channel supporter XNED for the Bakunin Pure Stigmato Duo battle report request. As a reminder, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member on YouTube. I take requests from both for battle report topics, faction-focused topics, etc. They go into a list, and to the extent possible, I do try to get to all of them in time. Not always possible, not always possible to be timely, but if you have something that you would like to see, the way to bring it to my attention is that way. So, I hope very much that you've enjoyed this. We'll be back next week with more Infinity content, and I will see you then.